The morning light spilled through my bay window, painting the oak floorboards of my Naples living room in soft gold. I sat in my old rocking chair, the one Robert had carved for our 30th anniversary, cradling a steaming mug of Earl Grey. The scent of chamomile from a candle on the mantel mingled with the salty breeze drifting off the Gulf of Mexico. At 76, I'd learned to find peace in these quiet moments, but this morning, peace was a thin veneer. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, shattering the stillness. Claire's name flashed across the screen. I took a slow sip of tea, steadying myself before answering. Mom Claire's voice was high, frayed at the edges, like a thread pulled too tight. Something's wrong with our mortgage. We just got a notice. Some company called Sunrise Solutions says our payment didn't go through. It's a mistake, right? You've got to call someone. I set the mug down, the porcelain clinking softly against the coaster. My heart didn't race. It hadn't in years. Not since I'd stood in the principal's office at Meadowview Elementary, facing down angry parents or defiant kids. But something stirred in me, a resolve I'd kept locked away for too long. Read me the notice. Honey, I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. Claire stumbled through the words, her panic rising. It says our payment of $1,250 is insufficient for the $4,000 monthly obligation. That's crazy. Mom, we've paid the same amount for 5 years. No problem. It mentions default proceedings. What does that even mean? I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. Outside, a pelican swooped low over the water, its wings catching the sunlight. It sounds serious, I said, pausing to let the weight settle. Maybe you should contact the mortgage holder. I tried, Claire snapped, then caught herself, softening her tone. The number goes to Sunrise Solutions. I've never heard of them. A recording said someone would call back, but we need this fixed now. Can you help? You always know who to call. I traced the rim of my mug, feeling the warmth against my fingertips. 5 years ago, I'd made a choice to save their home, to keep my daughter-in-law, her husband, and my grandchildren under a roof they couldn't afford. 5 years of wiring $3,000 each month to Sunrise Solutions, LLC. My company. While they thought their measly $1,250 was enough. 5 years of silence, believing family meant carrying their burdens without asking for thanks. But the video Ethan sent last week had changed everything. I can help, I said, my voice steady as the tide. I know exactly who to speak with at Sunrise Solutions. Relief flooded Claire's voice. Oh, thank God. Mom, can you call them now, please? No need, I said, and the words felt like a key turning in a long, rusted lock. I am Sunrise Solutions. Claire, I created it 5 years ago to buy your mortgage when you and Mark were about to lose your house. Silence stretched across the line, thick and heavy. Then, a nervous laugh. What, Mom? That's not possible. Our mortgage is with Gulf Coast Credit Union. No, honey, I corrected gently, as if explaining a math problem to a child. You thought it was a credit union because that's what we let you believe. The papers you signed transferred your mortgage to my company. I've been covering $3,000 of your payment every month while you paid $1,250. That's $162,500 of my savings. Claire, to keep you in that beachfront house with the palm-lined driveway. Her breathing quickened, sharp and shallow. You're saying, you've been paying our mortgage for 5 years. Why wouldn't you tell us? I closed my eyes, picturing her in that gleaming kitchen, her blonde hair swept into a perfect bun, her Gucci purse slung over a chair. Would you have accepted my help if I had? Would Mark's pride have let him admit you needed me? That's insane, she sputtered. You lied to us, you tricked us. I helped without humiliating you. I said, my voice still soft but edged with steel. But perspective's everything, isn't it? A muffled shout came through the phone. Mark's voice, hot and furious. Put her on speaker. Claire. The line crackled, and he was there, filling the space between us. Eleanor, what the hell is this? You can't just drop a bomb like that if this is true. You've been deceiving us for years. I opened my eyes. Glancing at the framed photo on the mantel, me and Robert on Siesta Key, his arm around me, both of us laughing into the sunset. I kept your family in a home you couldn't afford. Mark, I said. I didn't ask for gratitude, but I didn't expect to be called a useless burden either. What are you talking about? Claire's voice wavered, but it lacked conviction. I stood, walking to the window, the Gulf sparkling beyond the mangroves. Ethan sent me a video last week. I said, you, Mark, and Sophie, sitting around your kitchen island, wine glasses in hand. You called me a burden, Claire. Said I owed you for driving me to the doctor, for listening to my endless stories. Mark said I should sell my Siesta Key condo because you deserved it more. Sophie just nodded, not saying a word. Silence again, deeper this time, like the hush before a storm. Mark tried to recover, his tone shifting to damage control. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. Eleanor, you know we've been under pressure bills, the business, everything. I understand stress. I said, my gaze fixed on a sailboat gliding across the horizon. I felt it when I watched that video 3 times, each word cutting a little deeper. I felt it when I realized I've spent $162,500 to keep you comfortable while you plotted to take my home, my memories, my independence. Claire's voice broke, a sob catching in her throat. Mom, please. We didn't mean it like that. Let's talk this out. We're family. I turned from the window, my fingers brushing the folder on the coffee table, thick with documents, the LLC agreement, payment records, the default clause. We'll talk. I said, come over, bring Mark. There's a lot you need to see. 40 minutes later, their BMW screeched into my driveway, tires crunching against the crushed shell path. I opened the door before they could knock. The scent of Claire's Chanel perfume hitting me first, sharp and expensive. She stood there, eyes red but makeup flawless, her linen dress clinging to her frame. Mark loomed behind her, his polo shirt rumpled, a vein pulsing at his temple. They stepped inside, their indignation filling my small living room like a thundercloud. This better not be some kind of joke. Eleanor, Mark said, his voice low, barely containing his anger. Claire says you're claiming to own our mortgage. That's absurd. No joke, I said, gesturing to the sofa, its faded floral cushions a contrast to their polished appearance. Sit down. We have a lot to discuss. They didn't sit. Claire crossed her arms, her purse dangling from her elbow, while Mark paced, his loafers scuffing my rug. If this is true, Claire said, her voice tight, you've been manipulating us. That's not fair. Mom, we have a serious problem with our house. I picked up the folder, its weight grounding me. I'm not claiming anything, I said, opening it to reveal neatly tabbed pages. Here's the truth. The purchase agreement you signed 5 years ago, transferring your mortgage to Sunrise Solutions LLC. Here's every payment record, $3,000 from me, $1,250 from you, every month. And here's the default clause, triggered when yesterday's payment came up short. Mark snatched the folder, flipping through it with frantic energy. This can't be legal, he muttered. You tricked us into signing this. We were under duress. Did I force you to sign without reading? I asked, my tone as gentle as a teacher correcting a student. Did I hide the terms? Or did you just not bother to check because you were desperate to keep that house with the ocean view and the custom pool? His face reddened, the vein throbbing harder. Any court would throw this out. He said, "We'll fight you." Eleanor, my lawyer, James Carter, disagrees. I said, sitting back in my rocking chair, the creak a steady rhythm. He has your financial records from 2020 showing you were insolvent. I offered a lifeline. You took it. You've benefited for 5 years. No complaints until now. Claire sank onto the sofa, her purse sliding to the floor. Why? Mom, she whispered, her voice small for the first time. Why go through all this secrecy? I looked at her, seeing the young woman who'd once helped me bake gingerbread in my kitchen, her laughter filling the air. Because you needed help but wouldn't take it straight, I said. Because Mark's ego couldn't handle owing me. Because I wanted to protect my families without being your bank. Mark stopped pacing, his hands clenched. So what now? You're kicking us out. Our own mother-in-law, not kicking, I corrected. The default clause gives Sunrise Solutions ownership. You're month-to-month tenants now. You have 30 days to vacate, per Florida law. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You're evicting us, your own family. What about Sophie? Ethan. Sophie has her apartment, I said, my voice steady, despite the ache in my chest. Ethan's already found his own place. He's the one who showed me who you really are. Mark's eyes narrowed. Ethan recorded us, that little careful. I interrupted, my tone sharpening. That little boy had the courage to show me the truth. He's the only one who saw how you treated me and cared enough to act. Claire's tears came now, streaking her mascara. Mom, we can fix this. Whatever we said, we didn't mean it. Please don't destroy our family over a misunderstanding. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. This isn't a misunderstanding. Claire, it's a reckoning. For 5 years, I carried your burden while you called me worthless. I paid $162,500 to keep your life polished while you planned to take my Siesta Key condo, to strip my independence. Actions have consequences. Mark threw the folder down, papers fluttering across the table. This is revenge, he said, his voice flat. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? I stood, walking to the mantel, where a seashell from Siesta Key caught the light. No, I said softly, turning to face him. I've been waiting for a thank you that never came, but I'm not waiting anymore. They left without another word, Claire's sobs fading as their car roared away. I stood by the window, watching the Gulf ripple under a sky heavy with clouds. Last week, when Ethan's video had arrived, I'd sat in this room, the moonlight cold on my skin, feeling like my heart was a house of cards, collapsing under their betrayal. Now, with the truth laid bare, I felt something new, not triumph, but clarity. I was done carrying a love that only asked for respect in return. If this story's touched you, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to my channel to hear more tales of heart and strength. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're reading from or what moved you today. Let's share these journeys together, shall we? The scent of gingerbread still lingers in my memory, warm and sweet, from those long ago afternoons when Claire and I would bake together in my Naples kitchen. It was 1985, and she was just 18, her hair tied back with a scrunchie, her laughter filling the air as we dusted flour on each other's noses. You're the best, Eleanor, she'd say, her eyes bright with a kind of trust I thought would last forever. But that was before she married Mark, before the palm-lined streets of Naples became a stage for her ambitions, before I became the useless burden in her video, sitting in my rocking chair now, the Gulf of Mexico shimmering beyond my window. I wonder where that girl went and how I let myself carry so much for so long. After Claire and Mark left my house yesterday, their BMW tearing out of my driveway. I didn't sleep. I spent the night sorting through old photo albums, their pages brittle under my fingers. Each picture told a story of sacrifice, of love I gave without expecting return. 5 years ago, I'd saved their beachfront home from foreclosure, wiring $3,000 every month through my company, Sunrise Solutions, LLC. While they thought their $1,250 was enough, I did it to keep my family together, to give my grandchildren, Ethan and Sophie, a stable home. But as I traced the edges of a faded snapshot, Claire and me at her college graduation, both of us beaming, I realized the cost was more than money. It was pieces of my heart, given away to people who stopped noticing. When Robert died in 2012, a heart attack stealing him between one breath and the next, I felt like the world had gone quiet. We'd been married 41 years, built a life on his accountant's caution and my teacher's patience. He left me our Naples bungalow, a nest egg of $1.2 million, and our Siesta Key condo, where we dreamed of watching sunsets in retirement. Know what's under the hood. Eleanor, he'd always said, poring over spreadsheets at our oak dining table. I took his advice, managing our finances with the same care I'd used as principal of Gulf Coast Elementary, balancing budgets and mediating disputes, but no spreadsheet could prepare me for the loneliness of a house without his laughter. I filled my days with small joys, the book club at the Naples Library, where we'd debate Jane Austen over coffee, volunteering at Gulf Coast, helping third graders sound out words, morning walks along Vanderbilt Beach, the sand cool under my feet. But nights were harder. I'd sit in my sunroom, the Gulf's waves a distant murmur, and wonder if I still mattered to anyone. My son, Claire's first husband, had passed in a car accident years before, leaving her as my daughter-in-law, my tie to family. Ethan and Sophie, my grandchildren, were my light, but Claire was the bridge to them, and that bridge was fraying. Claire had changed since marrying Mark in 2015. Back in '85, when she was a college freshman, she'd spend weekends at our house, helping me plant petunias or learning Robert's trick for perfect pancakes. She was ambitious, studying interior design, dreaming of her own firm. I saw myself in her someone who worked hard, who believed in building something lasting. But Mark, with his slick smile and startup schemes, brought out a different side. He promised wealth, and Claire chased it. Trading her warmth for a polished life in Naples' gated communities, their wedding was a spectacle: white roses, a string quartet, a reception at the Ritz-Carlton. I paid for half, dipping into savings, because Claire said it was a fresh start. I didn't mind then. Family helps family. By 2020, their fresh start was crumbling. Mark's tech startup, a delivery app he swore would rival Uber, had burned through Claire's inheritance from my son and their savings. The pandemic hit, and Claire's design business stalled. No one was renovating mansions when the world was locked down. Their beachfront house, a sprawling Mediterranean with a pool overlooking the Gulf, became a weight they couldn't carry. I knew they were struggling. Claire's calls grew shorter, her voice tighter, but I didn't expect her to show up at my door one October evening, her mascara streaking, her hands trembling. "Eleanor, we're in trouble," she said, standing on my porch, the cicadas humming in the dusk. Her linen blouse was wrinkled, a rare crack in her perfect facade. "The bank's foreclosing. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. They won't budge." I ushered her inside, the smell of my lavender potpourri mingling with her expensive perfume. She sank onto my sofa, clutching a tissue, and poured out the story: Mark's failed investments, her empty client list, the $4,000 monthly payments they couldn't meet. "We've tried everything," she sobbed. "I don't know what to do." My heart ached for her, for Ethan and Sophie, who'd lose their home just as they were starting college. I thought of Robert, who'd always saved for rainy days and knew what he'd do. "Don't cry, honey," I said, patting her hand. "We'll figure this out. Family sticks together." That night, I called Lila Khan, my financial advisor of 10 years. She arrived the next morning, her silk scarf neatly pinned, her laptop open on my kitchen table. Lila was steady, never promising miracles like Mark's advisors did, only careful growth. She studied Claire's financials, her brow furrowing. "It's a mess." "Eleanor," she said, sipping the tea I'd brewed, "they're underwater by $80,000. Paying off their debt directly would drain your savings and teach them nothing." "What can I do?" I asked, my fingers tracing the grain of the table, where Robert used to sketch budget plans. Lila leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "We create an LLC Sunrise Solutions. It buys their mortgage from the bank. They make partial payments to what they think is a credit union. While you cover the rest, they keep their dignity, you protect your investment, and if they default, you own the property." It was brilliant, a way to help without breaking them or me. "They won't know it's me," I asked, "not unless they fail to pay." Lila said, "We'll use a law firm to handle communication. It's clean, legal, and fair." I signed the papers a week later, my hand steady despite the weight of the decision. Claire hugged me when I told her the mortgage was refinanced, her tears soaking my sweater. "I don't know how you did it," she kept saying. "Mark tried everything." Her gratitude felt like sunshine after a storm, and I believed it would last. I was wrong. The first year, I barely noticed the sacrifice. Wiring $3,000 each month was a rhythm, like paying utilities or tithing at church. I cut back on little things, no cruises with my book club, fewer dinners at Trulux, one less trip to Siesta Key. The condo sat empty most months, its shutters closed, Robert's fishing hat still hanging by the door. I told myself it was worth it to keep Claire's family safe. Ethan was studying engineering at Florida State. Sophie was starting at UF, and their home was their anchor. But by the second year, I saw the cracks. Claire's calls dwindled to holiday check-ins, her voice clipped, like she was doing me a favor. Mark bought a BMW, claiming it was for client meetings, though his new venture, a crypto app, wasn't turning a profit. Their house gleamed with upgrades, a new chandelier, quartz counters, a pergola by the pool. I'd visit for Christmas or birthdays, bringing my homemade pecan pie, and feel like a guest in a museum. "Love the pie." "Eleanor," Claire would say, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Sophie would hug me, then disappear to her phone. Ethan was different. He'd sit with me, ask about my garden, his eyes so like Robert's, but even he couldn't bridge the distance. One summer evening in 2022, at Sophie's high school graduation party, I stepped onto their patio to take a call from Lila about LLC taxes. When I hung up, Ethan was there, leaning against the railing, his beer bottle sweating in the heat. "You own Mom and Dad's house?" he asked, his voice low, his brows raised. I froze, the Gulf's waves crashing faintly in the distance. I could have lied, but Ethan deserved better. "Not exactly," I said, sitting on a wicker chair. "I'm helping them keep it." I explained the LLC, the $3,000 I paid, the secret I'd kept. His jaw tightened as I spoke, his fingers gripping the bottle. "Why do you do it when they treat you like that?" he asked, nodding toward the house, where Mark was loudly pitching his crypto app to guests. "They don't even invite you to Thanksgiving anymore." I looked at the stars, their light blurred by the humidity. "They're family, Ethan," I said simply. "Family helps family." He shook his head, his expression a mix of admiration and frustration. "They don't deserve you, Grandma." He promised to keep my secret, and I believed him. Ethan was my anchor, the one who still saw me. Looking back, I see how I blinded myself to the truth. Claire's gratitude faded within months, replaced by eye rolls when I mentioned my teacher's pension. Mark's jokes about my old school savings stung, but I brushed them off. I'd spent 30 years at Gulf Coast Elementary, guiding kids through fights and fears, and I thought I could guide Claire's family the same way. But children are honest in their cruelty. Adults just hide it better. Each month, as I transferred the money, I'd sit in my kitchen, the clock ticking above the sink, and think of Robert. He'd taught me to save, to plan, to protect what mattered. But he'd also taught me love meant showing up, even when it hurt. I believed my payments were love, a silent vow to keep my family whole. I didn't see that love can't thrive without respect, or that I was giving mine to people who'd stopped returning it. Now, as I close the photo album, a picture of Claire and me at Siesta Key in 1999 slips out. We're on the beach, her arm around me, both of us squinting into the sun. I remember that day she'd just landed her first design client, and we'd celebrated with ice cream cones, the sand sticking to our feet. I thought we'd always be close, that family meant forever, but forever's a fragile thing. And as I tuck the photo away, I know the next 30 days will test what's left of us. The Gulf of Mexico was restless tonight, its waves churning under a moonless sky. As if it sensed the storm brewing in my heart, I sat in my Naples living room, the glow of my phone casting shadows across the seashell collection on my coffee table. Ethan's text had arrived an hour ago, at 11:42 p.m. Grandma, I'm sorry, but you need to see this. No explanation, just a video file that I hadn't dared to open until now. At 76. I'd faced angry parents, rebellious students, and the ache of losing Robert. But nothing prepared me for the betrayal waiting in those 30 seconds. As I pressed play, Claire's voice sliced through the silence. Sharp as a winter wind, Eleanor's such a useless burden. My breath caught, and the room seemed to tilt, but I kept watching, because sometimes truth is the only way to see clearly. It's been 2 weeks since Claire and Mark stormed out of my house, their indignation echoing in my driveway after I revealed I'd been paying their mortgage for 5 years through Sunrise Solutions LLC. They haven't called since, but I know they're plotting. Claire's always been good at spinning a story to get what she wants. I should be angry, but instead, I'm hollow, like a driftwood shell washed up on Vanderbilt Beach. For 5 years, I wired $3,000 a month to keep their beachfront home, believing it was my duty to family. I thought love meant sacrifice, even when it went unnoticed. But as I clutched my phone, Claire's words looping in my mind, I realized I wasn't their mother-in-law, I was their bank, and they resented me for it. The cracks in our family didn't appear overnight. They started small, like hairline fractures in a porcelain cup, barely noticeable until the whole thing shatters. After I saved their house from foreclosure in 2020, I expected things to change. Claire's tears of relief, her arms around me that day, felt like a promise. But promises are fragile in Naples, where palm trees sway and appearances matter more than truth. By 2021, Claire and Mark were back to their old ways, as if their brush with ruin was just a bad dream. Their Mediterranean-style home gleamed brighter each time I visited, its stucco walls glowing under the Florida sun. They'd added a pergola by the pool, strung with fairy lights, and replaced the kitchen's oak cabinets with sleek white ones, the kind you see in magazines. I'd bring my pecan pie for Christmas or Ethan's birthday, the dish warm in my hands, and feel like I was stepping into a stranger's world. Love the pie, Eleanor, Claire would say, her smile tight, her eyes already on her phone. Mark would offer me a glass of Chardonnay, then launch into his latest venture, a crypto app, a real estate flip, always something game-changing. I'd nod, sipping water, while Sophie scrolled Instagram across the table. Her earbuds in, Sophie used to be my shadow. In 2010, when she was 5, she'd spend Saturdays at my bungalow, helping me water the hibiscus or painting seashells with glitter glue. "You're my favorite, Grandma," she'd say, her ponytail bouncing. But by 2021, at 16, she was distant, her hugs quick and obligatory. I told myself it was just teenage phases, like the kids I'd guided at Gulf Coast Elementary. I'd send her texts about my book club or the pelicans nesting by the pier, hoping to spark a reply. Sometimes I'd get a cool or a heart emoji, but mostly silence. Ethan was my lifeline. At 20, he was studying engineering at Florida State. His steady gaze so like Robert's, it sometimes hurt to look at him. He'd call to check on me, asking about my garden or the stray cat I fed on my porch. "You doing okay, Grandma?" he'd say, and I'd hear the worry in his voice, as if he saw what I refused to. During his summer breaks, he'd help me prune the bougainvillea, his hands quick and careful, and we'd talk about his dreams of building bridges, literal ones. He'd grin, not the mushy kind, but I knew he was building a bridge to me, one I clung to as Claire's family drifted further away. The shift was subtle at first. Claire stopped inviting me to Thanksgiving, claiming they were keeping it small. Mark's jokes about my teacher's pension, "Bet you're sitting on a gold mine." Eleanor carried a bite. They'd plan vacations to the Maldives or Aspen, posting photos of turquoise waters and snowy slopes, but never ask me along. I'd find out from Ethan or the neighborhood grapevine, Naples being a small world despite its wealth. I told myself they were busy, that family didn't need constant tending like my petunias, but deep down, I felt it, the slow erosion of respect, like sand slipping through my fingers on Siesta Key. By 2022, the distance was undeniable. At Sophie's high school graduation party, held at their house with a catered spread and a DJ, I felt like an afterthought. Claire greeted me with a cheek kiss, her Chanel perfume sharp, then flitted off to charm guests. Mark was holding court by the pool, pitching his crypto app to men in linen shirts, while Sophie posed for photos in her cap and gown, her smile Instagram perfect. I stood by the buffet, my coral blouse out of place among the designer dresses, and wondered when I'd become invisible. I stepped onto the patio to take a call from Lila Khan, my financial advisor, about quarterly taxes for Sunrise Solutions. The Gulf breeze cooled my face as I listened to her calm, precise voice. When I hung up, Ethan was there, leaning against the railing, a beer in hand. "You own Mom and Dad's house?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes searching mine. I hesitated, the waves crashing faintly below. Ethan was no child. He deserved the truth. "Not exactly," I said, sitting on a wicker chair. "I'm helping them keep it." I told him about the LLC, the $3,000 I paid each month, the secret I'd kept to spare their pride. His jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the bottle. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" he asked, gesturing toward the house, where Mark's laughter boomed. "They act like you owe them." "Grandma." I looked at the stars, their light soft in the humid air. "They're family." "Ethan," I said, "family helps family, even when it's hard." He shook his head, his expression a mix of awe and frustration. "They don't deserve your kindness." He swore to keep my secret, and I trusted him. And now I'll tell them they told. But that night, as I drove home, the Gulf's dark expanse stretching beside me, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I helping them or enabling them? The video Ethan sent last week shattered any illusions I had left. I'd been pruning my hibiscus that evening, the scent of earth grounding me, when my phone pinged. His message was stark, almost an apology. I waited until I was alone. the house quiet except for the tick of my grandfather clock. Before pressing play, the screen lit up my living room, and there they were, Claire, Mark, and Sophie around their kitchen island, wine glasses catching the light. "Eleanor's such a useless burden," Claire said, her voice dripping with scorn. She leaned back, her silk blouse shimmering, a martini in her hand. After all we do driving her to the doctor, picking up her groceries, listening to her endless stories about her school days. She barely helps us. Mark nodded, his arms crossed, a smirk on his face. She owes us. Claire, that Siesta Key condo's just sitting there, eating up taxes, while we're drowning in bills. She should sell it, give us what's fair. Sophie, sitting cross-legged on a stool, stared at her phone, her face blank. She didn't speak, didn't defend me, just nodded faintly, her silence cutting deeper than their words. Claire sipped her drink, her eyes narrowing. Evan says her portfolio's outdated. If we convince her to sell, we can manage the money better, or, if she gets stubborn, there's guardianship laws in Florida. She's old enough for that. I paused the video, my hands trembling, the phone slipping to my lap. Guardianship. The word echoed, cold and clinical, like a diagnosis I couldn't shake. I'd taught myself Excel at 60, traveled solo to Charleston at 65, and still walked a mile along the beach every morning. But to them, I was a relic, a vault to be cracked. I played the video again, then a third time, each word searing itself into me, burning away the hope I'd clung to. My eyes stayed dry, but something inside me shifted, like a tide turning before a storm. So I stood, walking to the mantel, where a photo of Robert and me at Siesta Key rested. We were laughing, his arm around me, the sunset painting the sand gold. "What would you do?" "Love," I whispered, tracing his smile. Robert had always said, "Know what's under the hood, Eleanor." I knew now. The hood was off, and what I saw was a family that didn't value me not as a mother, not as a person, only as a means to an end. Claire's text arrived the next morning, dinner Sunday. "Mom, we need to talk." I knew what they wanted: the condo, my savings, maybe even my freedom. I typed back, "Of course, dear," adding a heart emoji, a mask I'd learned to wear. But as I set the phone down, the Gulf's waves crashing beyond my window, I felt a resolve take root. I'd carried their burden for 5 years, believing it was love. Now, with 14 days until their next mortgage payment, I knew it was time to lay that burden down. The Gulf of Mexico stretched before my Naples bungalow, its waves catching the last rays of a crimson sunset, as if whispering courage for what lay ahead. I stood on my porch, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, the scent of jasmine from my garden mingling with the salty air. 13 days remained until Claire and Mark's next mortgage payment was due, the payment I'd decided not to make, triggering the default clause of Sunrise Solutions LLC. For 5 years, I'd carried their $3,000 monthly burden, believing it kept our family whole. But after Ethan's video, their voices branding me a useless burden, I saw the truth: love doesn't thrive on one-sided sacrifice. As I watched a heron glide over the water, I felt a resolve take root, steady as the mangrove trees lining the shore. Claire's text from 2 weeks ago still burned in my mind. Dinner Sunday. "Mom, we need to talk." I'd replied with a heart emoji, playing the part of the obliging mother-in-law. But I knew their game. They wanted my Siesta Key condo, my savings, maybe even my independence. Since then, their pressure had intensified, like a storm gathering strength. But at 76, after 30 years steering Gulf Coast Elementary through tantrums and crises, I wasn't easily swayed. I'd taught myself to see through performances, and Claire's was about to begin. The Sunday dinner was a masterclass in pretense, staged in their Mediterranean beachfront home, its stucco walls glowing under the Naples twilight. I parked my Camry in their palm-lined driveway, the engine's hum fading into the chirp of crickets. Claire greeted me at the door, her Chanel perfume sharp, her linen dress crisp despite the humidity. "You look wonderful." "Mom," she said, her cheek grazing mine, her smile as polished as her marble foyer. It was a lie I wore the same coral blouse and jeans I'd worn to their last 3 gatherings, but lies were Claire's currency. "Something smells delicious," I said, stepping inside, the cool air carrying the scent of saffron and seafood. Mark emerged from the kitchen, a spatula in hand, his polo shirt pressed to perfection. "Paella night," he announced, grinning like a host on a cooking show. Sophie, 22 and radiant, appeared from the living room, her phone tucked away for once. "Grandma, you're glowing," she said, her hug quick but warm. Her words felt rehearsed, like lines from a script. They ushered me to the dining room, where a chandelier cast prisms across a white tablecloth. The table was set with bone china, a centerpiece of orchids nodding in the candlelight. It was beautiful, but cold, like a stage before the curtain rises. Claire poured Chardonnay, her manicured nails glinting, and Mark served the paella with a flourish, shrimp nestled in golden rice. They chatted about neutral topics, Sophie's photography internship, the new marina downtown, my book club's latest pick. I sipped my water, nodding, but their warmth was a veneer, and I'd seen too many parent conferences to miss the signs of an ambush. Then came the shift, subtle as a tide turning. Sophie leaned forward, her voice soft. "Remember when we went to Siesta Key when I was little? Grandma, you and Grandpa taught me to build sandcastles." Her eyes sparkled, but I saw the calculation behind them. "Those were good days," I said, picturing Robert kneeling in the sand, his laugh mingling with the waves. "You love those shells we found." "I was thinking," Sophie continued, her tone earnest, "it'd be amazing to document those memories there. I could bring my camera, stay a week, make a photo book of the condo's history." The request hung in the air, its meaning clear, a claim to my condo, a foothold in my legacy. Claire placed a hand over mine, her touch light but firm. "Mom, we're worried about you managing that place alone," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "The taxes, the upkeep, it's a lot for someone, well, at your age." Mark nodded. His fork paused mid-air. "It's not just the condo. Eleanor, we're thinking about your whole future. You shouldn't have to carry all that responsibility by yourself." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my voice even. "You mean my finances?" "Too." Claire's smile tightened, but she recovered quickly. "We just want to make things easier. Mom, selling our condo could free up so much money you could invest smarter, with Evan Brooks' help. He's got a modern approach, not like Lila's old-school methods." I set my glass down, the ice clinking softly. "I trust Lila," I said. "She's kept me secure for 15 years. Disappointment flickered across Claire's face, masked by a sip of wine. Mark leaned in, his tone earnest. "Property values in Siesta Key are peaking. Eleanor, Evan says now's the time to sell. You'd maximize your return. And we could manage the proceeds for the family." The family, they meant themselves, as if my life's work belonged to their dreams. "That's a lot to consider," I said, folding my napkin. "May I use the restroom?" The guest bathroom was a shrine to their excess Italian marble, gold faucets, a mirror reflecting my tired eyes. I washed my hands, the water cool against my skin, and steadied my breath. As I stepped out, voices drifted from the study down the hall, the door ajar. Principal's instinct kicked in, honed from years of catching whispers in school corridors. I paused, heart thudding. "She's not biting," Mark hissed, his voice low but sharp. "All that setup, and she's still clinging to Lila." "Give it time," Claire replied, her tone icy. "Evan Brooks says elderly women need multiple talks to make big decisions." A third voice startled me. "Evan, their financial advisor, who I hadn't known was there. If she resists," he said, calm as a snake. "We move to plan B. Property tax issues are a good scare. We can say there's a lien, create urgency. If that fails, Florida's guardianship laws are straightforward. Document confusion, forgetfulness, and you're set." My chest tightened, the air suddenly too thick. Guardianship. They weren't just after my condo, they were plotting to strip my freedom, to declare me incompetent. I backed away, my flat silent on the hardwood, and returned to the dining room, my face a mask of calm. Claire smiled as I sat, oblivious. "Coffee, Mom." "I should head home," I said, glancing at my watch. Driving's tricky after dark these days. It was a lie I drove to walk to aerobics thrice weekly, but it gave me an out. They protested, their disappointment palpable, but I left with a smile, my heart a fortress. The next 12 days were a siege of manipulation. Claire appeared at my bungalow with a peach cobbler, her concern as thin as the crust. "Mom." "I was worried," she said, settling at my kitchen table, its oak surface scarred from years of family meals. "Evan found a tax glitch with your Siesta Key condo's serious penalties, maybe even a lien. Selling it would clear everything up." "Sounds troubling," I said, slicing the cobbler, the knife glinting. "I'll check with Lila." Her eyes flashed with irritation. "Mom, this needs quick action. Evan has a cash buyer ready, above market value." "I'll think it over," I said, my tone non-committal. She left. Her smile strained, and I felt the weight of her agenda. Mark showed up at my walk to aerobics class at the Naples Community Center, a place he'd never visited. He waited by the pool, his loafers out of place among the seniors in flip-flops. "Eleanor." "I was nearby," he said, offering to drive me home. In his BMW, the leather cool against my damp swimsuit, he mentioned articles about seniors giving up their keys. "We could handle your driving if you move closer to us," he said, his voice casual but pointed. I smiled, watching the palm trees blur past. "I manage fine." "Mark," I said, but his frustration was a pulse in the air. Sophie texted, her words careful, Grandma. "Can I come to Siesta Key next weekend? I'd love to shoot those photos." I saw through it a pretext to stake a claim, to soften me for their plan. I replied, "Let's talk soon, honey," and left it at that. Each move tightened the knot in my chest, but I wasn't alone. I met Lila Khan at her Tampa office, its walls lined with family photos, the scent of coffee grounding me. She reviewed the LLC documents, her silk scarf pinned neatly. "Your position's rock solid," she said, her eyes steady over her glasses. "The default clause kicks in if you withhold your $3,000. They'll get a notice this décharnage the next day." "What about guardianship threats?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Her expression darkened. "That's serious, but we'll counter it. I've arranged a cognitive evaluation tomorrow standard for elder law cases. It'll prove you're sharp as ever." The evaluation, conducted in a sterile clinic, was a breeze memory tests, math problems, logic puzzles. I scored perfectly. The doctors nod, a shield against their lies. Back home, Ethan texted, his words urgent. "They're planning something big. Grandma, check your email." He'd sent screenshots of Claire's group chat with Mark, Sophie, and Evan, titled Family Finances. The messages were a cold dissection of my worth. "Eleanor's too stubborn with her condo. Evan says she's worth 1.15 million. Guardianship's the last resort." My throat tightened. but I felt a fire kindle inside, like the glow of a lighthouse in a storm. I met Ethan at a diner in Fort Myers, far from Naples' prying eyes. He slid into the booth, his baseball cap low, his eyes troubled. "They're desperate," he said, pushing his phone across the table. "Dad's been searching guardianship laws, talking to lawyers about protecting your assets." I sipped my coffee, its bitterness matching my mood. "Are you sure you want to be in the middle of this?" I asked, studying his face, so like Robert's in profile. He leaned forward, his voice fierce. "They're wrong, Grandma. I've seen how they treat you taking your money, then acting like you're a chore. I can't stay quiet anymore." I reached for his hand, its warmth steadying me. "This will change things with your parents." I said. "I know," he said, his jaw set. "Some things need changing." That evening, I stood by the Gulf, the horizon ablaze with orange and pink, the waves lapping at my bare feet. I thought of Robert, his voice clear in my memory. "Know what's under the hood." Eleanor. I knew now. Claire and Mark weren't just ungrateful, they were predators, circling my life like sharks. For 5 years, I'd believed my $162,500 was a gift of love. But love doesn't demand silence or scorn. With 12 days left, I made my choice. I wouldn't pay the $3,000. The default would come. And with it, the truth. I returned to my bungalow, the scent of jasmine following me inside. On my mantel, a seashell from Siesta Key glowed in the lamplight, a reminder of days when family meant laughter, not leverage. I wasn't the mother-in-law who'd bend anymore. I was Eleanor Harper, and I was ready to stand tall. The Naples sunrise painted my kitchen in hues of coral and gold, the Gulf of Mexico shimmering beyond my window, like a promise of new beginnings. I sat at my oak table, a mug of Earl Grey warming my hands, its steam curling like a prayer. Yesterday, at midnight, the mortgage payment for Claire and Mark's beachfront home came due, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't wire my $3,000 through Sunrise Solutions, LLC. Their $1,250 was insufficient, triggering the default clause I'd set in motion 13 days ago. At 8:17 a.m., the automated notice went out, and by 8:19, my phone rang Claire. Her voice a storm of panic. I'd told her the truth. I was their landlord, their savior, their useless burden. Now, as I sipped my tea, the silence of my bungalow felt like the calm after a hurricane, but the wreckage was just beginning to surface. For 5 years, I'd paid $162,500 to keep their Mediterranean palace standing, believing it was my duty to family. Ethan's video had shattered that illusion, showing me Claire, Mark, and Sophie's contempt, their plot to seize my Siesta Key condo, even their talk of guardianship to strip my freedom. At 76, I'd learned to face hard truths as principal of Gulf Coast Elementary. I'd mediated countless disputes, seen through lies, but nothing cut deeper than family turning predator. Yet, as I watched a pelican dive into the Gulf, I felt no triumph, only a quiet resolve. This wasn't revenge, it was consequence, and it was time they faced it. Claire's call that morning was the first wave of their desperation. "Mom, something's terribly wrong," she said, her voice cracking. "The mortgage notice says our payment's short $1,250 instead of $4,000. It mentions default. It's a mistake, right? I traced the grain of my table. Where Robert used to sketch our budgets. What does it say about the mortgage holder?" I asked. My tone even, like calming a distraught parent. "Some company Sunrise Solutions," she said, frustration seeping through. "I've never heard of them. They're threatening proceedings." "Mom, you said you knew them. Can you fix this?" I closed my eyes, picturing her in that gleaming kitchen, her Gucci purse slung over a chair. "I already told you." "Claire," I said softly, "I am Sunrise Solutions. I've been covering your mortgage for 5 years. Yesterday—" I stopped. Her gasp was sharp, followed by silence, then Mark's voice, loud and accusing. "Eleanor, this is insane. You can't just pull the rug out like this. We'll lose our home." "You signed the agreement," I said, opening my eyes to the Gulf's sparkle. "You benefited for 5 years while calling me a burden. Now, the terms applied default means I own the property. You have 30 days to vacate." Claire's sob broke through, raw and jagged. "Mom, please, we're family. We can work this out. We'll talk when you're ready to face the truth," I said, and hung up, my hand steady but my heart heavy. I thought of Robert. His voice clear, know what's under the hood. Eleanor. I knew now, and it was time to stand firm. 40 minutes later, their BMW roared into my driveway, tires crunching the shell path. I opened the door, the scent of Claire Chanel hitting me first, her eyes red but defiant. Mark loomed behind, his polo shirt wrinkled, his face a mask of fury. They stormed into my living room, their anger clashing with the soft ticking of my grandfather clock. "This is extortion," Mark snapped, tossing the LLC folder onto my coffee table, papers scattering like leaves. "You tricked us into this deal." "Eleanor, no court will uphold it." I gestured to the sofa, its floral cushions faded but familiar. "Sit." "Mark," I said, my voice calm, honed from years of handling tantrums. "You signed willingly in 2020 when you were insolvent. I saved your home. Did I force you to ignore the terms?" Claire sank onto the sofa, her purse sliding to the floor. "Why are you doing this?" "Mom," she whispered, her voice small. "We didn't mean those things in the video." I picked up a seashell from the table, its smooth curve cool in my palm. "You called me worthless," I said, meeting her gaze. "You planned to take my condo, to declare me incompetent. Ethan showed me everything, your group chat, your talks with Evan Brooks." Mark's face paled, but he rallied. That was stress talking. "Eleanor, you know we've been struggling Claire's business, my ventures. People say dumb things." I sat in my rocking chair, the creak a steady rhythm. "Actions have consequences," I said. "For 5 years, I carried your burden while you scorned me. That ends now." Claire's tears came, streaking her mascara. "You're destroying our family," she said, her voice breaking. "What about Sophie and Ethan?" Sophie chose silence. I said, the words heavy. "Ethan chose truth. He's the only one who saw me as more than a bank." Mark paced, his loafers scuffing my rug. "We'll fight this," he growled. "We'll tell everyone you manipulated us, that you're confused." My lawyer, James Carter, arrived then, his leather portfolio in hand, his grey hair catching the light. "Mrs. Harper," he said, nodding to me, then turned to them. "I'm here to deliver the eviction notice. It outlines the 30-day timeline under Florida law." Claire gasped, clutching Mark's arm. "Eviction, Mom. You can't." James placed the documents on the table, his voice smooth. "The LLC agreement is airtight. You acknowledge the debt with every partial payment. Contesting it would be costly and unlikely to succeed. Additionally, we have evidence of potential elder abuse, your discussions about guardianship." Mark's jaw clenched, but he signed the notice, his hand shaking. Claire scrawled her name, tears dripping onto the paper. They left without a word, their BMW's roar fading into the Gulf's hum. I stood by the window, the pelicans soaring above the water, and felt a strange peace, not joy, but clarity. I'd laid down a burden I'd carried too long. The next 30 days were a flood of apologies, each more hollow than the last. Claire called daily, her voice shifting from tearful pleas to veiled accusations. Mom, we're family, she sobbed one night, the gulf dark beyond my sunroom. We said things we didn't mean. Let's fix this together. I listened, noting how her sorry was for being caught, not for the betrayal. Words aren't enough. Claire, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Show me you understand. Mark emailed, his tone transactional, offering to pay a higher mortgage rate, as if our bond was a ledger. He never mentioned the video, the group chat, the guardianship plot, just numbers. Cold and calculated, I didn't reply, letting James handle the legal replies, his measured words a shield against their desperation. Sophie came to my bungalow one afternoon, unannounced, her hair pulled back, her eyes shadowed. She stood in my kitchen, the scent of my lavender potpourri mingling with her citrus shampoo. Grandma, I'm sorry, she said, holding a small canvas, a painting I'd made for her 10th birthday, waves crashing on Siesta Key. I didn't know they'd go so far. I poured us tea, the mugs clinking softly. You sat there, Sophie, I said, my voice steady. You heard them call me worthless, planned to take my life, and you said nothing. Her eyes filled with tears, the canvas trembling in her hands. I was scared, she whispered. I thought it was just talk. I didn't want to lose Mom and Dad. I looked at her, seeing the girl who'd once glitter-glued shells with me, and felt a pang. I paid half your college tuition, I said, fixed your car last year, gave you $5,000 for your apartment, yet you stayed silent. I know, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. Sorry's a start, I said, setting my mug down. But trust is earned, not given. Show me you're different. She left, the canvas on my table, a fragile bridge I wasn't ready to cross. I thought of 2010 when Sophie and I baked cookies in this kitchen, her laughter bright as the hibiscus outside. That girl was still in her, somewhere, but she had to find her way back. Claire's final plea came a week later. A package, delivered to my porch, the Gulf breeze rustling its wrapping. Inside was a photo album, its leather cover worn, filled with pictures of Robert's last summer at Siesta Key. We were fishing, laughing, the sand glowing under the sunset. A note fell out. In Claire's neat script, I'm trying to understand. Mom. I held the album, the scent of old paper stirring memories, and felt a crack in my resolve. I didn't call her, but I placed the album by my bed. A door left ajar. The eviction came quietly, 2 days before the sheriff's deadline. They left the house cluttered, dishes in the sink, trash overflowing, a petty act of spite. I walked through its empty rooms with James, the marble floors scuffed, the pergola's lights unstrung. It wasn't the home I'd saved. It was a monument to their entitlement. This strengthens our case, James said, noting the mess for insurance. I nodded, but my heart was elsewhere. I met Lila at the house the next day, her scarf bright against the grey sky. What now, she asked, her laptop open on the kitchen island where Claire had scorned me. I looked out at the Gulf, its waves steady. It's time to give it purpose, I said. We drafted plans for the Harper transition home, a non-profit for elderly patients recovering post-hospitalization. The kitchen would host cooking classes, the sunroom a therapy space, the bedrooms named for teachers who'd shaped me. Robert would have loved it. He always said wealth was for creating opportunity. As we worked, I wrestled with doubt. Had I been too harsh? Could I have forgiven Claire? Spared them this? I thought of 2005 when Claire and I cared for Robert after his first heart scare, our hands brushing as we adjusted his pillows. We'd been close then, bound by love, but love can't survive contempt. And their betrayal video, group chat, guardianship was a wound too deep for quick healing. Ethan visited that evening, bringing groceries I didn't need, his presence a balm. We sat in my sunroom, the Gulf's waves a soft lullaby. "They're falling apart," he said, stirring sugar into his tea. "Mom's crying all the time. Dad's blaming everyone. They're in a motel now." I reached for his hand, his warmth grounding me. "You're not responsible for them," I said. "You chose truth, and that's enough." He nodded, his eyes bright. "I'm proud of you, Grandma." This he gestured to the plans for the non-profit. "It's what Grandpa would have done." I smiled, seeing Robert in his profile, and felt a peace settle over me. I wasn't destroying a family, I was reclaiming my worth, building something lasting. The Gulf glittered under the stars, and I knew, whatever came next, I was ready. The Siesta Key sunset spilled across the horizon, its golden light dancing on the Gulf of Mexico like a canvas painted just for me. I stood on the balcony of my condo, the sea breeze tangling my silver hair, the scent of salt and hibiscus wrapping me in a gentle embrace. At 76, I'd found a new rhythm here, one that didn't carry the weight of others' expectations. 6 months had passed since I'd let the default clause of Sunrise Solutions LLC take Claire and Mark's Naples home, turning it into the Harper Transition Home for elderly patients. Their betrayal calling me a useless burden, plotting to seize this very condo had broken something in me. But from those cracks, I'd grown anew, like a mangrove reaching for sunlight. As I leaned against the railing, a watercolor brush in hand, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was living. And it felt like coming home. Naples was behind me now, its palm-lined streets and polished facades a chapter closed. Siesta Key was my sanctuary, where the waves whispered Robert's laughter and the sand held our memories. I'd spent 5 years paying $162,500 to keep Claire's family afloat, believing it was love. Ethan's video had shown me otherwise. And though the eviction was a reckoning, it was also my liberation. I'd carried their burden too long. But now, unweighted, I was discovering parts of myself I'd forgotten, parts that laughed, painted, and dared to dream at an age when the world expects you to fade. The Harper Transition Home opened 3 months ago, its doors welcoming its first residents, seniors recovering from hospital stays, needing a bridge to independence. I'd walked its halls last week, the Mediterranean walls repainted in soft blues. The kitchen where Claire once scorned me now alive with the smell of fresh-baked cornbread. Volunteers taught cooking classes. Therapists led stretches in the sunroom, and laughter echoed where entitlement once ruled. Each bedroom bore the name of a teacher who'd shaped me, Miss Clara, who taught me patience, Mr. Hayes, who showed me strength. I'd stood in the entryway, Ethan at my side, as we hung a plaque, Harper Transition Home, in memory of Robert Harper. "He'd love this, Grandma," Ethan said, his hammer steady. Turning a house into hope, I smiled, seeing Robert in his eyes. He always said wealth was for creating opportunity. I said, "This is his legacy." 2. Ethan was my rock, his visits a cherished routine. He'd landed an engineering job in Tampa, designing bridges, literal ones, as he'd promised. Over Sunday dinners at my condo, we'd share grouper tacos and stories. The Gulf's waves our soundtrack. "You're different now," he told me one evening. His fork paused over a slice of key lime pie, lighter, like you're not carrying the world anymore. I laughed, the sound surprising me. I carried enough, didn't I? "It's time to carry myself." He nodded, his grin warm. Grandpa would be proud. So am I. Sophie was finding her way, slowly, like a seedling pushing through sand. She'd started volunteering at the transition home, quiet at first, arranging flowers or washing dishes. I watched her from afar, noting how her hands moved with care, how her eyes softened when residents shared their stories. One afternoon, she approached me in the kitchen, the scent of lemon cleaner lingering. "Grandma," she said, her voice hesitant. "Can I help with the art class? I brought some of my photos, thought they might inspire the residents." I studied her, seeing the girl who'd once glitter-glued shells with me. "That's a start." "Sophie," I said, handing her an apron. "Keep showing up." She nodded, her smile tentative, and I felt a flicker of hope. I remembered 2012, when Sophie, at 7, had curled up beside me after Robert's funeral, her small hand in mine. That bond wasn't gone, just buried. And maybe, with time, we'd unearth it. Claire remained distant, her pride a wall I couldn't scale. She'd moved with Mark to a small apartment in Fort Myers, their BMW repossessed, her designer wardrobe sold online. Ethan told me they were struggling, but I resisted the urge to fix it. I'd done enough of that, and it had only bred contempt. But 2 weeks ago, Claire called, her voice softer, stripped of its usual polish. "Mom," she said. The Gulf's waves faint through my phone. "We're trying to start over. It's hard, but I'm seeing things differently." I stood on my balcony, the stars bright above Siesta Key. "I'm glad, Claire," I said, my voice steady. "If you mean it, I'm here, but respect comes first. No more games." She choked back a sob. "I know, I'm sorry." "Mom, I'll try." I didn't promise forgiveness, but I didn't close the door. I thought of 1995 when Claire and I sat on this very balcony, sharing ice cream cones, her dreams of design as bright as the sunset. That woman was still in her, somewhere, but she had to find her own path back. Siesta Key had become my canvas. Each day, a brushstroke of rediscovery. I'd joined a watercolor class at the community center, my paintings of waves and pelicans lining my condo's walls. At first, my hands shook, unused to creating for myself. But the teacher, a kind woman named Rosa, coaxed me forward. "You've got a story in those colors." "Eleanor," she said, her smile warm. I painted Robert's fishing hat, still hanging by the door, and felt him beside me, cheering me on. I'd learnt to kayak too, my arms stronger than I'd expected, the Gulf's gentle swells rocking me like a cradle. My first trip out, I'd laughed so hard I nearly tipped over, the water sparkling around me. "You're a natural," my instructor called, and I felt 20 again. Free in a way I hadn't since Robert and I danced at our wedding. I made friends retirees like me, their stories of loss and love weaving a new community. We'd share coffee at the village cafe, the scent of cinnamon rolls mingling with our laughter, and I realized I wasn't alone anymore. One evening, as I paddled back to shore, the Gulf surfaced like glass. I thought of the woman I'd been 6 months ago, bound by duty, weighed by love that asked nothing in return, that Eleanor had believed family meant sacrifice, even when it meant diminishing herself. The video, the eviction, the reckoning, they weren't just consequences for Claire, they were my awakening. I'd learned to set boundaries, to value my worth, to live for myself. At 76, I was just beginning. I stood in the transition home's garden last month, the hibiscus blooming red against the blue sky, when Sophie handed me a photo she'd taken a resident, her face lit by a smile, holding a watercolor of the Gulf. "I thought you'd like this," Sophie said, her voice shy. "It reminds me of you strong, even after everything." I took it, my throat tight. "Thank you, honey," I said, and for the first time in months, I saw a bridge forming, fragile but real. Ethan brought his girlfriend, Mia, to dinner last week, a social work student with kind eyes. Over conch fritters, she asked about my years teaching. Her questions genuine. "You must have changed so many lives," she said, and I felt a warmth I'd missed. Ethan grinned, squeezing her hand, and I saw a future for them, built on respect. Claire texted yesterday, a single line. Can I visit Siesta Key sometime? I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it. I stood on my balcony, the Gulf's waves a steady heartbeat, and pictured her here, not as the daughter-in-law who'd betrayed me, but as someone learning to see me. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give, yet it was hers to earn, but I'd leave the door ajar. Because love, when it's true, doesn't demand perfection, only effort. I set my watercolor brush down, the canvas before me alive with the Gulf's golden waves. Robert's fishing hat swayed in the breeze, his presence a quiet strength. I thought of the years I'd carried decades of teaching, of loving, of sacrificing, and the years ahead, uncharted but mine. I'd been a mother, a wife, a principal, but now I was Eleanor, and that was enough. The sunset deepened, its colors a promise no matter your age, you're worthy of love, of respect, of a life that's yours. I stepped back, the Gulf song filling me, and knew I'd found my shore. Thank you for walking this journey with me, from heartbreak to healing. If Eleanor's story has touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel for more tales of courage and hope. Drop a comment below. Where are you reading from? Or, what's a moment that helped you find your strength? Let's keep sharing these stories, heart to heart, because together we shine brighter.